Hello, everybody. It's me, the Excellent Reviewer. We're back for another Dark Side of the Ring. David Schultz, the Slap Heard Round the World edition of the show. And I believe we only have 3 more episodes left of Dark Side of the Ring before the season 2 comes to an end. We have the season finale, which is Owen Hart. We have one on the Road Warriors, and I believe one on Herb Abrams. Which that one I'm honestly looking forward to. I'm honestly looking forward to that one. I know the Owen Hart in particular is going to be one that is hard to talk about. But let's get on with this one. Dr. D, Dave Schultz. He was the ultimate bad guy. I mean, he was the baddest bad guy that you could imagine. He had great wrestling ability, he's a great talker, and he just played this ruthless animal. And we'll get into some of the stuff that, because he was so believable in his role as Dr. D, as being someone who is abusive, being someone who is just like mean and angry, and we'll get to that later. So they of course bring Dr. Dave Schultz in, to interview, and they talk about how he got his training from Herb Welch, which was like this old school, like when wrestling was like in the 50s and 60s, like old school. We're talking about real old school. And so Herb Welch was, the person who agreed to train Dr. D. And since he's old school, of course he would beat the shit out of Dr. D. But Dr. D, because they say in the documentary, they say that Herb Welch was sort of surprised because Dr. D would fight back. He would fight back. He wouldn't be like someone that would be easily pushed around. And Herb had told Dave Schultz that he was really stiff. He was a little too stiff. And Dave Schultz, who knew barely anything about the wrestling business, thought that it was real, when in fact, it really wasn't. And Schultz was taught very early on about kayfabe, and how important it is. Kayfabe was king, and there's nothing more important than kayfabe. And like, if you're not supposed to be like having a beer with the guy that you just beat up, because this was all an act. This was all an act, and you could not be seen doing that, because that would be potentially destroying the business. So Schultz put 2 and 2 together, and he decided that he was going to go out, and he started wrestling, and he was quickly garnering success from his training. He was being this rude, nasty heel, and he was really good at it, and he was making a lot of money. He was making a big name for himself. And this is before Vince McMahon took over. Before Vince took over, Schultz and Hulk Hogan, they were working together. They were working a lot together, and as the more that they were working, the more that a buzz would be created about them. And as they were creating more of a buzz, well, that is when Vince McMahon took notice of Hulk Hogan. And he sees this blonde dynamo, and how we know that he loves big sweaty men. He decided that he would, of course, come on and sign Hulk Hogan. But Hulk Hogan, he knew that they could make just as much money in the WWE if they bring Schultz in, because they had like really good chemistry with each other, and the two of them could make a lot of money working together. So Vince brought Dave Schultz in, but he wanted Schultz to, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So he wanted Schultz to be the biggest, the baddest bad guy around, and he would fully live his gimmick. I mean, like, Schultz was very committed to keeping up kayfabe, and in television, he would shoot rifles in houses that they were shooting in. He would shoot the rifles, and he would be seen yelling at his wife and his kids, and he was so like realistic and so good at his gimmick that the police showed up to Vince's office and they wanted to know where David Schultz lived because they had warrants to arrest him for child and spousal abuse. Now that's living up to your gimmick. Say what you want about MJF, like being his gimmick 24/7. He's got nothing on David Schultz, who had legit arrest warrants out on him. But sorry, I just think that that's really funny. Um, it's just really funny because he was that good at his gimmick, and people, like they were believing it. They were believing it, and that was the problem that John Stossel, because now he comes into the picture, that John Stossel had, because at the time he was just this up and coming journalist who was working for ABC. And he was looking for his next big story, and he wanted to expose wrestling because a lot of people at the time, they believed that it was still real. There was a survey that was done, and they said that a third of the people that went to the live events believed that wrestling was real. So the problem that John Stossel was having was that he needed someone that was willing to expose the business and say that wrestling was fake, and to show the TV audience, how they did the moves and how they were going to do it without actually hurting one another. And they got Eddie Mansfield, and Eddie Mansfield was a professional wrestler who was very much so wronged by the business. And he was very pissed about the fact that they're selling out these big arenas and they are working their asses off, but they're getting paid very little with no health care whatsoever. And he felt as though if this was going to be viewed as a real sport, they should get paid like real athletes and they should be treated like real athletes with health care. And this is still a problem that exists within the world of wrestling today. So the bookers were getting tired of Eddie Mansfield, so they started to not book him anymore. And so he did not like that. He was essentially out of the wrestling business. So he went and called John Stossel at ABC and he says, hey, let me tell you the secrets of pro wrestling. And so they show like the moves, how it's done, everything of that nature, exposing the business to a whole different degree. And Eddie Mansfield, he says that he was trying to help the business, and that's why he agreed to do the interview, so that he could bring up the poor conditions that the wrestlers go through, like getting paid very little, and the no health insurance. But this is big media news. ABC, of course, had their own agenda to focus on, and they only wanted to focus on the fact that wrestling was fake. And they could give two craps about the conditions that the wrestlers worked in. And I had a feeling, this feeling, because Mansfield says he's like, I was doing it for the boys. I wanted to make sure that, they get the work conditions that they deserve. But you just gotta believe, because he was pissed that just a tiny little bit, just from his words, you can tell that maybe just a tiny, there's a portion of him that was doing it for spite of the company, for spite of everything that had happened to him, of how he was wronged. And then we get to the famous day. So John Stossel goes to Madison Square Garden. I believe it was Madison Square Garden. I might be somewhere else, but I'm pretty sure it was Madison Square Garden, because WWE was there that day. I love. It's one of the most everlasting images of pro wrestling out there. It's so amazing. So they go, and before the interview, any of the interviews started, Vince said to Dr. D, he's like, hey, there's this interviewer, ABC News. He's this guy. he's making fun of the business, making a joke of the business. And he's all like, I want you to be in full character mode. I want you to rough him up a little bit. And that's what Dr. Schultz said Vince McMahon told him to do, was to be in full character and be like, be an asshole. And so Stossel was interviewing the Iron Sheik. And Vince comes up to Stossel and he says, well, hey, here's this other guy. And he introduces Dr. D. So Stossel he said he was a little intimidated. And so he's like, so I'll ask you the standard question. Dr. D answers the standard question. He's like, I think this is fake. And within an instant, no doubt, I don't need to go over this, because if you've been a fan of wrestling, you know that this happened. The slap across the ear that John Stossel deserved. Don't go off pissing off professional wrestlers. That's the bottom line. Don't go off pissing off professional wrestlers. And so they said, no, I just think that's funny, yo. It's really funny. And so Stossel gets up again. He's like, that was my mistake. I should have just stayed down. Schultz slaps him again. And there's ringing in his ears. There's ringing in his ears. That's what Stossel alleges, that there was ringing in his ears after the event. So Schultz, he goes on to have his match with Antonio Inoki, which I did not expect that kind of matchup to ever happen, but it happened that night. And Vince tells Schultz, just go to your hotel room, like leave, because Stossel, he says that he's hurt and that he's gonna call the cops. And so Schultz reluctantly goes to his hotel room. And the next day, the New York Athletic Commission, they suspended Schultz after what had happened. And so they had this idea that Vince was like, okay, I'm going to send you off to Japan so you can like go work a little bit, and the heat can die down from everything. So they also talk about the backlash from airing that 2020 special, and how everyone basically was putting John Stossel as enemy number one, everyone in the wrestling business, because, well, he was affecting how they were making money. He was trying to destroy the wrestling business. And they also hated Eddie Mansfield because, well, Eddie Mansfield was out there exposing everything, revealing the secrets on how to do it. Eddie Mansfield, he said he got death threats and people tried to plant cocaine on him so they could get him arrested. And all of this because at the time, kayfabe was very, very, very much so regarded, as, like the top level thing that you should do. Protect the business, protect everything. So Schultz goes off to Japan, so he can work a little bit while everything dies down. And Schultz says that the first thing that they wanted him to do was to attack a reporter. And Schultz knew better. He said he knew, like, how much heat he got from, hitting John Stossel. And he was all like, I'm not going to do it unless it's in the script. And so, of course, they wrote it into the script. And they're playing up this angle that, Schultz, he came over to Japan to attack reporters just like he did over there in New York. I just thought that was funny. Hey, we want you to slap a reporter. Go with what works, I guess. So Stossel had, he was saying that, he had this massive ear damage from the incident, and said that it was hard to change his daughter's diapers, and every time that she would cry, it would hurt his ears. And so the next step for him was to sue WWE for damages. And so it was revealed that Vince himself and the company was being sued, not David Schultz. So Vince wanted Schultz to sign a paper basically saying that he acted alone in this and that it was all his fault. But Schultz was not wanting to do that because, well, he's all like, no, because it was not my idea. It was your idea, Vince. And he's like, so I'm not signing no, so I'm not signing any paper that's saying it's my fault when you told me to do it. And so he leaves that meeting, and Stossel is told that he has to see, their WWE's doctors, because that's it's part of the legal thing. It's part of a legal thing, and so they're saying basically before the doctor, like as soon as the doctor walks in the room, he's all like, "Oh, I think you're suffering from I forgot what it was called, but he's all like, you're suffering from basically being traumatized. You're still traumatized for being slapped by Dr. D." And so John Stossel was pissed, and he's like, "Screw you! I'm fucking out of here," because the doctor just like walked in and says that he was still traumatized by everything that happened to Dr. D. Years later, they settled out of court for $280,000. And after this is when we go full swing into the first WrestleMania, because this was Vince at his top. Everything was in the motion promoting the first ever WrestleMania. And they were, of course, promoting the big tag team match with Hulk Hogan and Mr. T. And Mr. T was this big Hollywood actor at the time. And Dr. D felt as though, how is it that this big Hollywood actor is in the main event of WrestleMania, yet I'm not on the card? So he was very pissed off, just to put two and two together. He was very pissed off that he wasn't on the card, and yet this Hollywood actor was. And so the story goes that Mr. T was backstage at an event, and he was talking to David Schultz. They were talking to each other, and Jay Strongbow was working backstage, and he told Schultz, "Hey, Vince told me if you were gonna bother Mr. T, then I'm gonna fire you." And so Schultz was like, "Okay, well then, go off and fire me." And so that night he was fired, all for talking to Mr. T. There are different accounts of what happened. Hulk Hogan claims, and this is a big claim because if Hulk Hogan said it, it's probably a lie. He's had numerous tall tales. He says that apparently Hulk Hogan was sitting next to Mr. T, and that all of a sudden Schultz came out of nowhere and slapped Hulk Hogan across the face, and that was the breaking point. But that's just, like I said, take it with a huge grain of salt when it comes to Hogan, because he's told a number of tall tales. So Schultz said that he was going to see a friend of his that was sitting right next to Mr. T, and Strongbow called the cops. He wanted Schultz out of the building, nowhere near Mr. T, saying, and he said that that Schultz was a big threat and that he was a dangerous guy, so they kicked him out, kicked him straight out. Apparently, they were pointing two rather large shotguns at him for kicking him out. And another thing that Schultz brings up, and it's a pretty good point. It's a pretty good point. It was the fact that, if you never seen it, Hulk Hogan, to promote WrestleMania, was on the Richard Belzer show. He was with Mr. T, and so of course the allegations of it being fake, came up, and so Hogan's like, "Well, let me show you something." Puts him in a front face lock, knocks the guy out. Guy falls down, cracks his skull open. He's bleeding on national television. And Hulk Hogan faced no repercussions whatsoever. He got no sort of heat at all whatsoever from the incident. And Cornette put it bluntly. Hogan was Vince's boy. And they were like, Hogan could have murdered someone, and Vince would be like, So what? Like Vince wouldn't see anything wrong with it because at the time Hogan was the top guy, and slowly and surely, Doctor D was getting this reputation that he was sort of a loose cannon, can't be controlled, and he was slowly starting to be blackballed from the business. Uh, you know, Dr. D says Vince had a lot to do with that, saying Vince was calling in favors, said don't hire this guy or else you'll never hear from me again. You'll never work with me again. Um, so Dr. D, he gained this reputation of being someone who was a loose cannon and out of control and not for the good reasons. So with very little bookings that he could get, he decided that he was going to become a bounty hunter. So he is one of the strangest, but it made sense. It made sense because Dr. D, he's terrifying to look at. He is terrifying, like to see old footage of him. Even now, seeing footage of him like firing like weapons is terrifying because David Schultz is at heart fucking crazy. So he talks about how basically wrestling helped him become a great bounty hunter because he knows where to like. He says he knows like how to grab an arm, how to grab a leg, what hold hurts and which one doesn't because he was doing it every single day. So he parlayed that into his role as a bounty hunter, and he found a lot of success and was making a lot of money from being a bounty hunter. And it wasn't as big as it was, I would say, now. That's what he says, that it wasn't as big as it is now. And he was, making a lot of money because no one else was doing this job except for Dr. D. And Dr. D says about how he saved these two young girls that were kidnapped from this guy, and this guy would chain them to a toilet, and the only way that they could drink water was from the toilet. And Dr. D traced him down, found him in Puerto Rico, and he ended up arresting him. And then here comes one of the kickers. Was now that Schultz was out of the wrestling business, Vince was now going to the New Jersey Athletic Commission and basically saying to everyone that wrestling was not real. Basically, the reason he did it is he didn't want to pay back taxes. He didn't want to pay taxes, because it's not a real sport. How can you pay taxes on a sport if it's not real? And Dr. D was like, well, what the fuck? Like, this whole entire time I was trained, to uphold kayfabe, and yet Vince McMahon is the one who single-handedly destroyed kayfabe. And so he wasn't very happy about that. And Dr. D, I don't know if he still does. It's not really stated if he still bounty hunts. I don't think he does. I think he's gotten a little too old for bounty hunting. But he now drives cotton around. But you get the feeling that he sort of does all these sort of different odd jobs. These different kind of, jobs, just to get paid. And he's not really, he doesn't really do just one thing. He does multiple things. And they asked Stossel, if you could say one thing to Dr. D right now, what would you say? And Stossel says, fuck you. And I seriously doubt that Stossel would say that in front of Dr. D, because even now at I don't even know how old Dr. D is, but even now at his old age, he is not one to be messed with. But yeah, that's how the documentary ends. And like the main takeaway was that it was sort of Dr. D was sort of too good for his too good of an actor, too good of a kayfabe character for his own good, because after everything with the reporter happened, like he could not find work in the wrestling business. And I still think it's hilarious. It's something that happened years ago, and people are still talking about it. Just like the New Jack incident, New Jack Mass Transit incident, everyone is still talking about the time John Stossel got his ears slapped for asking if wrestling was fake. It's one of the best things in the internet. I thought it was, like it was a good episode. It wasn't as good as the prior episodes. I thought the one with Dino Bravo was better and stuff like that. But I like this. It's sort of like less serious than the other ones have been, because it's been hard to talk about, Dino Bravo and his children. I didn't do a Chris Benoit video just because I didn't like. It was really hard to talk about, so I never did a Chris Benoit video. Um, but yeah, no, like this was like a little lighter, because no one died. No one died. Um, I look forward to these next 3 episodes. Herb Abrams. If you don't know about Herb Abrams, you got to do your research. Um, Herb Abrams, he died of a massive cocaine-induced heart attack while chasing a hooker naked with a baseball bat. That's Herb Abrams for you. And then we also have one on the Road Warriors and the season finale, Owen Hart's passing. All of that is, got to be documented. I believe Owen Hart's passing is going to be the toughest one aside from the Benoit one to watch. That's going to be really tough, because you look into the case and it's really sad. But yeah, that's been this episode for Dark Side of the Ring review. Do me a favor, let me know what you guys thought about this in the comments section below. Make sure you hit that like, share, and subscribe button. I've been Samuel V, aka The Excellent Reviewer. Stay safe out there, guys, and I'll see you all as soon as I can. Goodbye and good night. Bang!